Sarah Martinez adjusted her headset for the 100th time that morning, the familiar weight of the equipment pressing against her ears like an old friend. The control room buzzed with the quiet efficiency of a dozen operators, each hunched over their stations, fingers dancing across keyboards as they managed communications between field teams and command headquarters. To anyone walking through the facility, Sarah looked like just another face in the crowd of relay operators. Unremarkable, forgettable, and certainly not someone you'd expect to change the course of military operations. The morning briefing had been routine, or so everyone thought. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the room, his weathered face serious as he outlined the day's mission parameters. A high-value target had been identified in the remote mountains of Eastern Europe, and the new AI drone squadron would be deployed for reconnaissance and potential elimination. The drones, worth millions of dollars each, represented the cutting edge of military technology. Autonomous hunters capable of identifying, tracking, and engaging targets with minimal human oversight. Sarah listened to the briefing with the same attention she gave to everything else in her work. While her colleagues saw her role as simply passing along messages and coordinating communications, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to piece together fragments of information into a complete picture. Years of listening to radio chatter, intercepting scattered transmissions, and analyzing communication patterns had given her insights that even the most sophisticated artificial intelligence systems sometimes missed. As the briefing concluded and teams began preparing for the mission, Sarah noticed something troubling in the preliminary intelligence reports. The target's last known location didn't match the communication patterns she had been monitoring over the past week. While the AI systems had processed satellite imagery and identified what appeared to be the target's hideout, Sarah's analysis of radio frequencies and encrypted message traffic suggested a different story entirely. She approached Lieutenant Rodriguez, her immediate supervisor, with her concerns. Rodriguez was a decent officer, but like most people in the command structure, he viewed relay operators as necessary but unremarkable support staff. When Sarah explained her analysis of the communication patterns, he listened politely but dismissed her concerns with a patronizing smile. "Sarah, I appreciate your dedication, but we have million-dollar AI systems handling target identification and tracking. The drones have access to real-time satellite feeds, thermal imaging, and behavioral analysis algorithms that can process more data in a minute than you could analyze in a week. I think we can trust the technology on this one." But Sarah couldn't shake her unease. That evening, she stayed late in the communications center, officially to catch up on routine maintenance reports, but actually to conduct her own investigation. Using her authorized access to communication logs and frequency monitoring equipment, she began building a detailed picture of the target's movements over the past several days. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The target wasn't in the location the AI systems had identified. Based on the pattern of encrypted communications, the timing of radio silence periods, and the subtle changes in transmission frequencies, Sarah realized the target had moved to a completely different area, a location that would put him directly in the path of a civilian evacuation convoy scheduled to pass through the region the following morning. She tried reaching Lieutenant Rodriguez, but he was unavailable. The mission commander was in final briefings and couldn't be disturbed. The AI drone squadron was already being prepped for launch, and the entire operation was moving forward based on intelligence that Sarah was increasingly certain was wrong. Sarah faced an impossible choice. She could follow protocol, document her concerns, and submit them through proper channels, knowing that by the time anyone took her seriously, it would be too late. Or she could take matters into her own hands and risk her career, her security clearance, and possibly criminal charges for exceeding her authority. As she sat in the empty communications center, surrounded by the soft glow of monitoring equipment and the distant hum of the base's nighttime operations, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't live with herself if innocent civilians died, because she had followed protocol instead of following her instincts. Using her access to the communication systems, Sarah began what would either be the greatest success or the most spectacular failure of her military career. She started by establishing contact with field reconnaissance teams in the area, ostensibly to coordinate routine communication checks, but actually to gather real-time intelligence that could confirm or refute her analysis. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed every available data stream. not to hack into classified systems, but to use her authorized access in ways that pushed the boundaries of her role. She cross-referenced communication intercepts with weather reports, analyzing how atmospheric conditions might affect radio transmission patterns. She studied the terrain maps, understanding how the mountainous geography could create communication shadows and dead zones that might influence where someone would choose to transmit from. As the hours passed, Sarah's conviction grew stronger. Every piece of evidence she gathered supported her conclusion that the target had moved to a location approximately 15 kilometers from where the AI drones would be searching. More importantly, her analysis suggested that the target was planning something significant. The communication patterns indicated coordination with multiple other parties, suggesting either a planned escape or a major operation. By dawn, Sarah had compiled a comprehensive analysis that painted a very different picture from the official intelligence assessment. She had identified not just the target's actual location, but also the probable timing of his next move and the likely escape routes he would use. Her analysis was based on human intuition, pattern recognition, and years of experience reading between the lines of intercepted communications, skills that even the most advanced AI systems struggled to replicate. Now came the hardest part: convincing someone in authority to listen to a relay operator who was suggesting that millions of dollars worth of AI technology had gotten it wrong. Sarah knew that what she was about to do would either vindicate her years of careful observation and analysis or end her military career in disgrace. But as she prepared to make her move, she was driven by a certainty that came from deep professional expertise and an unshakable belief that sometimes human insight could see what machines could not. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the secure communication device that would connect her directly to the Mission Command Center. At 0530 hours, the facility was operating with a skeleton crew, but the drone mission was set to launch in just 2 hours. She knew that once those drones were airborne and following their programmed flight paths, it would be nearly impossible to redirect them without aborting the entire operation. The communication device crackled to life, and she was connected to Sergeant First Class Johnson, the duty officer in the command center. Johnson's voice was crisp and professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying fatigue that came from pulling an early morning shift during a high-stakes operation. Command Center, this is Communication Station 7. I need to speak with someone regarding the drone mission intelligence package, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady and authoritative. Station 7, this is Command. What's the nature of your inquiry? All mission parameters were finalized yesterday evening. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment where she either proved herself or destroyed her career. Sergeant Johnson, I've been conducting additional analysis of communication intercepts related to the target, and I have reason to believe there are significant discrepancies in the current intelligence assessment. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sarah could almost hear Johnson's skepticism through the static. Station 7, are you referring to official intelligence reports that came through your station? What's your clearance level for mission-critical intelligence? My clearance is sufficient for the communication intercepts I've been analyzing. Sergeant Johnson, I understand this is irregular, but I need someone to review my findings before the drones launch. The target is not where our systems think he is. Johnson's response was polite but firm. Station 7, I appreciate your diligence, but target identification and tracking are handled by specialized intelligence units working with AI-assisted analysis. Relay operators don't typically provide tactical intelligence assessments. Sarah felt her frustration building, but she forced herself to remain calm and professional. Sergeant Johnson, I understand the protocol, but I'm not providing a tactical assessment. I'm reporting a potential error in the foundational data that the AI systems are using for their analysis. If the communication intercepts that form the basis of their tracking algorithms are being misinterpreted, then their conclusions will be wrong regardless of how sophisticated the technology is. This time the pause was longer. Sarah could hear Johnson discussing something with someone else in the background, though she couldn't make out the words. When he came back on the line, his tone had shifted slightly. Station 7, hold your position. I'm going to patch you through to Lieutenant Colonel Morrison in Intelligence. He's overseeing the technical aspects of the drone operation. But I want to be clear. This is highly irregular, and you'd better have something substantial to justify this disruption. Sarah's heart was pounding as she waited for the connection. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison had a reputation as a brilliant but intimidating officer who had little patience for time wasters or protocol violations. When his voice came through the communication device, it carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "This is Morrison. I understand you have concerns about the target intelligence. You have exactly 3 minutes to explain why I should delay a multi-million-dollar operation based on the observations of a relay operator." Sarah had prepared for this moment, and she launched into her explanation with the precision of someone who had spent all night organizing her thoughts. "Sir, I've been monitoring communication patterns in the target area for the past week. The AI systems identified the target's location based on a transmission cluster that occurred 3 days ago. However, my analysis of subsequent communication suggests that transmission was either a decoy or the target has moved significantly." Morrison's voice was sharp. "What specific evidence supports this conclusion?" "Sir, the communication patterns show a deliberate shift in transmission timing and frequency usage that began approximately 18 hours after the identified location was established. The target appears to be using a communication protocol that creates false signatures while conducting actual coordination from a different location. Additionally, the radio silence periods don't match the sleep patterns that would be expected from someone operating from a fixed position." Sarah continued, her confidence growing as she outlined her analysis. "The real communications are happening during atmospheric conditions that provide better propagation characteristics from a location approximately 15 kilometers southeast of the identified position. The pattern suggests coordination with multiple parties, which could indicate either an evacuation operation or preparation for a significant action." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Sarah wondered if Morrison had disconnected the call. Finally, his voice came back thoughtful and measured. "Relay Operator Martinez, you're suggesting that our AI systems, which have access to real-time satellite feeds and sophisticated behavioral analysis algorithms, have been fooled by what amounts to a shell game played with radio transmissions?" "Sir, I'm suggesting that the target understands our technological capabilities and is exploiting the fact that AI systems excel at pattern recognition, but can struggle with deception that's specifically designed to create false patterns. The decoy transmissions are sophisticated enough to fool automated analysis, but they contain subtle inconsistencies that become apparent when you analyze them with human intuition and experience." Morrison asked several more pointed questions about her methodology and the specific technical details of her analysis. Sarah answered each one with growing confidence, realizing that her years of careful observation and her deep understanding of communication patterns had given her insights that complemented rather than competed with technological analysis. Finally, Morrison made his decision. "Martinez, I'm going to have you brief the mission commander directly. If you're wrong about this, it's going to be a very short conversation. But if you're right, you may have just prevented a significant intelligence failure." As Sarah was transferred to wait for the mission commander, she realized that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. She was no longer just a relay operator who passed messages and maintained communication equipment. Whether she succeeded or failed, she had demonstrated that human intelligence and technological systems could work together in ways that neither could achieve alone. The next few minutes would determine whether her analysis was brilliant insight or catastrophic error. But regardless of the outcome, Sarah had proven to herself that her years of careful observation and analysis had value beyond simply keeping communication channels open. She had shown that sometimes the most important intelligence came not from the most sophisticated systems, but from the human ability to recognize patterns that machines might miss. Colonel James Harrison was not a man who appreciated surprises, especially not on the morning of a critical drone operation that had been months in the planning. When Lieutenant Colonel Morrison burst into the command center at 06:15 hours, with news that a relay operator was questioning the fundamental intelligence behind the mission, Harrison's first instinct was to dismiss the concern and proceed with the operation as planned. But Morrison was not someone given to dramatics or poor judgment. If he thought the situation warranted the mission commander's attention, then Harrison was obligated to listen, even if it meant potentially delaying a time-sensitive operation. "Sir, I need you to hear this operator's analysis before we commit the drones to their current flight path," Morrison said urgently. She's identified potential deception in the target's communication patterns that our AI systems may have missed. Harrison looked at the mission timeline displayed on the main screen. The drones were scheduled to launch in 90 minutes, and any significant changes to the operation would require coordination with multiple agencies and potentially higher command approval. Morrison, we've spent weeks developing this intelligence package. Every piece of data has been analyzed by our best people and our most advanced systems. Now you're telling me that a communications operator has found something that everyone else missed? Sir, that's exactly what I'm telling you, and I think you need to hear her explanation directly. Against his better judgment, Harrison authorized the connection. When Sarah's voice came through the speakers in the command center, it was steady and professional despite the enormous pressure she was under. Colonel Harrison, I understand the gravity of questioning established intelligence, but I believe the target has deliberately created false communication signatures to mislead our tracking systems. Harrison's response was direct and uncompromising. Operator Martinez, I have limited time and even less patience for theories. Give me facts that justify disrupting a major operation. Sarah had anticipated this response and had prepared her most compelling evidence. Sir, 3 days ago our systems identified a communication cluster that placed the target at grid reference 341789. However, analysis of subsequent transmissions reveals a pattern that's inconsistent with actual operational communications. She continued, her voice gaining strength as she outlined her findings. The transmissions from that location follow a pattern that's too regular to be natural. They occur at precisely timed intervals that coincide with optimal atmospheric conditions for maximum signal propagation. This suggests someone who wants those transmissions to be intercepted and analyzed. Harrison found himself listening more intently than he had expected. Continue. Meanwhile, I've identified a secondary communication pattern that exhibits the irregular timing and frequency variations consistent with actual operational coordination. These communications originate from a location approximately 15 kilometers from the identified position and occur during atmospheric conditions that would make them more difficult to intercept. Sarah pulled up additional data on her screen as she spoke. The secondary pattern includes communication gaps that correspond with local weather events, transmission timing that aligns with natural movement patterns, and frequency usage that suggests coordination with multiple parties. This is what actual operational communications look like, not the textbook perfect pattern we've been tracking. Colonel Harrison exchanged glances with Morrison and the other senior officers in the command center. The analysis was compelling, but accepting it would mean acknowledging that their most advanced intelligence systems had been fooled by relatively simple deception techniques. Martinez, assuming your analysis is correct, what are the implications for the current mission? Sir, if the target is actually at the secondary location I've identified, the drone search pattern will miss him entirely. More critically, the secondary location puts him in proximity to a civilian evacuation convoy that's scheduled to transit the area at 0800 hours. If he's planning an operation against that convoy, our drones will be searching in the wrong location, while civilians are at risk. The command center fell silent as the implications of Sarah's analysis sank in. If she was right, they weren't just facing a failed mission, they were potentially missing a threat to civilian lives. Harrison made a decision that would either validate or destroy his confidence in advanced military technology. Morrison, I want our AI systems to reanalyze all available data with the assumption that the primary communication cluster is deceptive. Have them specifically look for secondary patterns that might indicate the target's actual location. For the next 30 minutes, the command center buzzed with activity as technicians and analysts worked to reprogram the AI systems to search for the patterns Sarah had identified. The process was complicated by the fact that the systems had been designed to look for obvious signatures, not subtle deceptions designed to exploit their analytical methods. As the reanalysis progressed, a troubling picture began to emerge. The AI systems, when specifically directed to look for deceptive patterns, began identifying the same inconsistencies that Sarah had noticed. The primary communication cluster showed signs of artificial regularity, while the secondary pattern exhibited the natural variations expected from genuine operational communications. More disturbing was the geographic analysis of the secondary location. The target's actual position, if Sarah was correct, provided excellent overwatch of the route the civilian convoy would be taking. It was an ideal location for an ambush or attack, which explained why the target might have gone to such lengths to conceal his presence there. Harrison faced a command decision that would affect not only the mission but potentially civilian lives. He could proceed with the original plan, trusting in the technological systems that had been the foundation of modern military operations, or he could authorize a significant modification to the mission based on the analysis of a relay operator who had no formal training in intelligence assessment. The decision was complicated by the time pressure. The civilian convoy was already en route and could not be easily redirected or delayed. If they were going to modify the drone mission to investigate the secondary location, it had to happen immediately. Harrison looked around the command center at the faces of his most experienced officers. Some showed skepticism about basing a major decision on one operator's analysis. Others reflected the growing realization that Sarah's assessment might represent a fundamental blind spot in their technological approach to intelligence gathering. "Morrison," Harrison said finally, "what's your professional assessment of Martinez's analysis?" Morrison's response was measured but decisive. "Sir, her methodology is sound, her technical understanding is exceptional, and her conclusions are supported by data that our systems initially missed. I believe we should modify the mission to investigate the secondary location." Harrison nodded slowly, weighing the risks of action against the risks of inaction. In his years of command, he had learned that the most dangerous decisions were often the ones that seemed safest at the time. Sometimes the greatest risk was refusing to adapt when new information challenged established assumptions. Colonel Harrison's decision to modify the mission sent shockwaves through the command structure. Within minutes of his authorization, the entire operation shifted from routine execution to emergency adaptation. The drone squadron, already in final pre-flight checks, had to be rapidly reprogrammed with new search, coordinates and mission parameters based on Sarah's analysis. Sarah found herself in the unprecedented position of being temporarily assigned to the mission command center, where she worked directly with the drone operators and intelligence analysts to translate her communication pattern analysis into actionable mission data. The experience was surreal. 12 hours earlier, she had been just another face in the communications department, and now she was helping to direct a multi-million-dollar military operation. The lead drone operator, Master Sergeant Kelly, was initially skeptical about the sudden changes. "So we're redirecting the entire squadron based on radio pattern analysis?" she asked, not bothering to hide her concern. "These drones are programmed for autonomous operation. Changing their parameters this close to launch introduces significant risk." Sarah understood the skepticism, but also knew that every minute of delay increased the danger to the civilian convoy. "Sergeant Kelly, I understand the technical challenges, but the communication patterns I've identified suggest the target is planning an operation timed to coincide with the convoy's passage through the area. If we don't investigate the secondary location, we may miss the only opportunity to prevent an attack on civilians." As the drone operators worked to implement the new mission parameters, Sarah continued monitoring communication patterns in real time. Her analysis had been based on historical data, but she knew that the target's behavior might change once any operation began. She established a direct communication link with the drone squadron, allowing her to provide real-time updates based on any new intelligence she gathered. The first drone launched at 6:45 hours, 15 minutes behind the original schedule, but still with enough time to investigate the secondary location before the convoy entered the danger area. As the unmanned aircraft climbed to operational altitude, Sarah tracked its progress while simultaneously monitoring radio frequencies for any sign that the target had detected the change in mission profile. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison stood behind Sarah's workstation, watching as she correlated drone telemetry with communication intercepts. "Martinez, the drones are approaching the secondary location you identified. Are you seeing any changes in the communication patterns?" Sarah studied the multiple data streams flowing across her screens. "Sir, there's been a significant decrease in radio traffic from the secondary location since the drone launched. Either the target has gone to communication silence as a precaution, or he's detected our approach and is modifying his plans." The first drone reached the secondary location at 07:02 hours, and its high-resolution cameras immediately began searching the terrain for signs of the target. The area was mountainous and heavily forested, providing numerous hiding places for someone who understood how to avoid aerial surveillance. Master Sergeant Kelly announced the initial findings over the communication system. Command, Drone 1 is on station at the secondary location. Initial visual sweep shows no obvious signs of human activity, but thermal imaging is detecting anomalous heat signatures that could indicate recent human presence. Sarah felt her heart racing as the validation of her analysis hung in the balance. If the drones found nothing at the secondary location, her career would likely be over, and worse, the real target might escape while they were searching in the wrong place. Command, this is Drone 1. Kelly's voice came through the speakers again. I'm detecting structured camouflage consistent with deliberate concealment efforts. Thermal imaging shows what appears to be a concealed observation post with sightlines to the convoy. Out. The command center erupted and controlled activity as Colonel Harrison ordered additional drones to converge on the location. Sarah's analysis had been correct. The target was indeed at the secondary location, and he had established a position that would allow him to attack the civilian convoy. But the discovery created a new problem. The target's position was expertly concealed and would be difficult for the drones to engage without risking civilian casualties from the convoy below. Moreover, the communication intercepts suggested that the target was not operating alone, and there might be additional threats that hadn't yet been identified. Sarah found herself in the unique position of being the only person who fully understood the communication patterns that had led to the discovery. As the drones gathered intelligence on the target's position, she continued analyzing radio intercepts to build a complete picture of the threat. Colonel Harrison, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the tactical discussions around her. The communication patterns indicate coordination with at least 2 other parties. The target at the observation post appears to be in a command role, but there are additional elements positioned elsewhere in the area. Harrison looked at her with a mixture of respect and concern. Martinez, can you identify the locations of these additional elements? Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard as she analyzed the communication data in real time. Sir, based on the signal timing and propagation characteristics, I believe there are additional positions approximately 2 kilometers north and south of the main observation post. The communication timing suggests a coordinated attack plan designed to trap the convoy in a crossfire. The complexity of the threat was becoming clear. What had initially appeared to be a single high-value target had revealed itself to be a sophisticated ambush operation involving multiple positions and careful coordination. The civilian convoy was walking into a carefully planned trap. Colonel Harrison made another crucial decision. All units were expanding the operation to address multiple threats. Drones 2 and 3 will investigate the suspected additional positions, while Drone 1 maintains surveillance on the primary target. As the drones spread out to investigate the additional locations, Sarah continued monitoring communication patterns for any sign that the targets had detected the aerial surveillance and were modifying their plans. The next few minutes would determine whether her analysis had prevented a tragedy or had simply delayed it. The Wangbi pressure in the command center was intense as everyone realized that they were no longer dealing with a routine target elimination mission, but with a complex operation to prevent a coordinated attack on civilians. Sarah's communication analysis had uncovered a threat that was far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had initially realized. Master Sergeant, Kelly's voice came through the communication system again, this time with urgency. Command, Drone 2 has confirmed a second concealed position with what appears to be heavy weapons capability. These positions are definitely coordinated for an ambush operation. Sarah felt a mix of vindication and terror. Her analysis had been correct, but the implications were more serious than she had imagined. The civilian convoy was heading directly into one of the most sophisticated ambush operations she had ever encountered, and stopping it would require perfect coordination between human intelligence and artificial intelligence systems. The command center had transformed into a nerve center of coordinated activity, as the full scope of the threat became clear. 3 concealed positions, sophisticated equipment, and a meticulously planned ambush targeting a civilian convoy carrying refugees from a war-torn region. Sarah's communication analysis had uncovered what could have been one of the most devastating attacks on non-combatants in recent memory. Colonel Harrison stood at the central command station, coordinating with multiple agencies while the clock ticked toward the convoy's arrival in the kill zone. "Martinez," he called out, "I need you to maintain real-time monitoring of all communication channels. If these targets change their plans or call for backup, I need to know immediately." Sarah had never operated under this level of pressure, but her years of training and natural analytical abilities kept her focused on the task. She established multiple monitoring protocols, tracking not just the known communication patterns, but also scanning for any new signals that might indicate additional threats or changes in the enemy's operational plan. At 07:15 hours, Drone 3 confirmed the worst fears of everyone in the command center. "Command, this is Drone 3. Third position confirmed with anti-vehicle capabilities. These positions form a perfect triangle that would allow coordinated fire on any convoy traveling the main route. Estimated time for convoy to enter kill zone is 12 minutes. The tactical situation was clear but complex. The three enemy positions were too well concealed and too widely separated for the drones to eliminate simultaneously. Any attack on one position would alert the others, potentially causing them to either flee or accelerate their attack timeline. Moreover, the proximity of the civilian convoy meant that any engagement carried the risk of collateral damage. Sarah noticed a change in the communication patterns that made her stomach drop. "Colonel Harrison, I'm detecting increased communication activity between the positions. The signal timing suggests they're accelerating their operational timeline." "What does that mean for the convoy?" Harrison asked tersely. "Sir, based on the pattern changes, I believe they've detected our aerial surveillance and are moving to execute their attack before we can interfere. The convoy may have less than 10 minutes before they're in immediate danger." The situation had reached a critical decision point. Traditional military doctrine would call for either eliminating the threats through drone strikes, which risked civilian casualties, or attempting to divert the convoy, which might not be possible given the terrain and timing constraints. But Lieutenant Colonel Morrison had an idea that would leverage both technological capabilities and Sarah's unique analytical skills. "Colonel, what if we use Martinez's communication analysis to disrupt their coordination rather than trying to eliminate the positions directly?" Harrison looked puzzled. "Explain." Morrison turned to Sarah. "Martinez, you understand their communication protocols better than anyone. Could we jam or spoof their communications to prevent coordinated action?" Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. "Sir, their communication system is sophisticated but not military grade. If I can identify the specific frequencies and timing protocols they're using, we might be able to introduce false signals that would disrupt their coordination." "How long would you need?" "Give me 3 minutes to analyze their current communication patterns, and I can probably identify the vulnerabilities in their system." Harrison made another command decision that would have seemed impossible 12 hours earlier, authorizing a relay operator to conduct an electronic warfare operation against enemy combatants. "Morrison, give Martinez whatever technical support she needs. Meanwhile, I want the drones repositioned for immediate response if the disruption fails." Sarah's workstation became the center of an improvised electronic warfare operation as she analyzed the enemy's communication protocols in real time. The targets were using a frequency hopping system that changed channels according to a predetermined pattern, but the pattern itself followed mathematical principles that could be predicted with sufficient analysis. Working with the facility's electronic warfare specialists, Sarah identified the sequence the enemy was using and developed a counter-strategy. Instead of jamming their communications entirely, which would alert them to the interference, they would introduce subtle delays and false confirmations that would disrupt the timing of their coordinated attack. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah announced, "I've identified their frequency pattern and timing protocol. We can introduce false signals that will make each position think the others are not ready to proceed. This should delay their attack and possibly cause them to abort if they believe their coordination has been compromised." "Execute the plan," Harrison ordered. The electronic warfare operation began at 07:22 hours. Just as the civilian convoy entered the outer edge of the danger zone, Sarah and her team introduced carefully crafted false signals into the enemy's communication network, creating the impression that one of the positions was experiencing technical difficulties and requesting a delay in the operation. The effect was immediate, and exactly as Sarah had predicted. The communication pattern between the positions shifted from operational coordination to problem-solving discussion. The targets began troubleshooting their supposed technical issues instead of preparing for the attack. "Command, this is Drone 1, Master Sergeant Kelly reported. Thermal imaging shows decreased activity at all three positions. They appear to be holding their positions but not actively preparing for engagement." But Sarah knew that the electronic deception would only work for a limited time. Eventually, the targets would realize they were being manipulated and would either flee or attempt to execute their attack, despite the communication problems. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah said urgently, "the deception is working, but we have maybe 5 minutes before they figure out what's happening. We need to use this time to either eliminate the threats or get the convoy to safety." Harrison coordinated with the convoy security team to accelerate their movement through the danger zone while the drones maintained surveillance on the three enemy positions. The operation had become a race against time, with Sarah's electronic warfare efforts buying precious minutes for the convoy to escape the kill zone. At 0728 hours, the convoy passed through the narrowest part of the route, where they would have been most vulnerable to the coordinated ambush. The enemy positions were still in place, but their communication disruption had prevented them from executing their planned attack. Sarah continued monitoring their communications as the convoy moved to safety. She could hear the growing confusion and frustration in their signals as they realized their operation had been compromised. Some of the communications suggested they were preparing to withdraw from their positions rather than risk exposure to the aerial surveillance. "Command, convoy is clear of the immediate danger zone," came the report from the convoy security team, requesting permission to continue to the safe zone. Colonel Harrison looked around the command center at the faces of his team, many of whom were still processing the fact that a relay operator had just prevented a major terrorist attack through communication analysis and electronic warfare. "Permission granted. Excellent work, everyone." But the operation wasn't over yet. The three enemy positions were still active, and allowing them to escape would mean they could potentially plan future attacks against other civilian targets. The success of the convoy protection had created an opportunity to eliminate a significant threat, but it would require continuing to leverage Sarah's unique insights into their communication patterns and operational behavior. With the civilian convoy safely through the danger zone, Colonel Harrison faced a new tactical challenge. The three enemy positions remained active and posed a continuing threat to other civilians and military operations in the region. However, the successful disruption of their attack had also provided valuable intelligence about their capabilities and operational methods. Sarah continued, monitoring their communications. As the enemy forces dealt with the failure of their carefully planned operation, the intercepted signals revealed growing disagreement between the positions about whether to withdraw immediately or attempt to salvage the mission by targeting other objectives in the area. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah reported, "their communications indicate they're planning to relocate to secondary positions. Based on the discussion patterns, they appear to have predetermined fallback locations that would allow them to threaten other routes in the region." The intelligence was crucial. Rather than simply escaping after a failed mission, these operatives were planning to continue their operations from different locations. This suggested a level of preparation and commitment that made them an ongoing threat to civilian and military operations throughout the area. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison studied the tactical display showing the locations of the three enemy positions in the surrounding terrain. "Martinez, can you predict where these secondary positions might be located based on their communication patterns?" Sarah had been thinking about the same question. "Sir, their communication protocols include references to predetermined rally points and alternate positions. Based on the signal timing and the geographic references I can identify, I believe their fallback positions are located in three specific areas that would give them similar Overwatch capabilities for other potential targets." She highlighted locations on the digital map as she spoke. The communication patterns suggest they have escape routes planned that lead to positions approximately 5 kilometers from their current locations. These new positions would give them overwatch of 2 other convoy routes and the main supply road to the regional headquarters. Colonel Harrison realized that Sarah's analysis had revealed not just an immediate threat, but an entire operational network designed to disrupt civilian evacuations and military logistics in the region. Eliminating these operatives would significantly improve security for ongoing operations. Morrison, what are our options for preventing their relocation to these secondary positions? Morrison consulted with the drone operators and tactical coordinators. Sir, if Martinez can continue tracking their communications during any movement, we can potentially intercept them during relocation when they're most vulnerable. Moving between concealed positions would expose them to aerial surveillance. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility as she realized that her continued analysis would be critical to the success of any interdiction operation. Colonel Harrison, I can track their communications during movement, but they'll likely implement communication security measures that will make monitoring more difficult. However, movement requires coordination, and coordination requires communication. I should be able to maintain some level of tracking, even if they increase their operational security. The decision was made to attempt interdiction of the enemy forces during their planned relocation. The drones would maintain surveillance on the current positions, while Sarah monitored communications for signs of movement. When the operatives began relocating, the drones would track and engage them during their most vulnerable phase. At 07:45 hours, Sarah detected the communication patterns that indicated the beginning of the enemy withdrawal. Colonel Harrison, they're initiating movement procedures. Based on the communication timing, the northern position will move first, followed by the southern position, with the command element moving last. The prediction proved accurate as Drone 2 detected movement from the northern position 15 minutes later. The thermal imaging showed two individuals leaving the concealed position and moving through the forest toward what Sarah had identified as one of the likely secondary locations. Command, this is Drone 2. Two individuals moving northeast from the northern position. They're following a route that matches Martinez's prediction for the secondary position location. Master Sergeant Kelly coordinated the drone response. Drone 2, maintain surveillance and prepare for engagement authorization. Drone 1, reposition to cover the predicted secondary location. The operation had evolved into a carefully choreographed interdiction mission, guided by Sarah's real-time analysis of enemy communications. As each position began its withdrawal, the drones tracked the movement while Sarah provided continuous updates based on the intercepted coordination signals. The southern position began moving at 08:15 hours, again following the pattern Sarah had predicted. But the command element's communications revealed a concerning development. They were discussing the possibility that their communications had been compromised and were considering changing their operational security procedures. Colonel Harrison, Sarah announced urgently. The command element suspects communication compromise. They're discussing switching to a different communication protocol that I might not be able to monitor effectively. Harrison looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the drones and the moving enemy forces. Two of the three elements were in transit and vulnerable to interdiction, but the command element was still in their concealed position and might escape if they implemented new communication security measures. Martinez, how much time do we have before they implement new communication protocols? Sarah analyzed the intercepted signals in real time. Sir, based on their discussion, they're planning to switch protocols after the other two elements reach their secondary positions. That gives us approximately 20 minutes to track the current movements and locate the command element before we lose communication intelligence. The timeline created pressure for immediate action. Harrison authorized engagement of the two elements currently in transit while directing additional resources to locate and track the command element before they could implement new communication security measures. The first engagement occurred at 08:28 hours when Drone 2 engaged the northern element as they approached their secondary position. The precision strike eliminated the threat while providing confirmation that Sarah's analysis of their movement patterns had been accurate. The southern element was engaged 10 minutes later with similar success, but the command element, hearing the explosions from the other engagements, immediately implemented communication, silence, and began what appeared to be an emergency evacuation procedure. Sarah found herself in a race against time to track the command element before they could escape or establish new operational security procedures. Using every technique she had developed over years of communication analysis, she searched for any electronic signature that might reveal their location or movement. Colonel Harrison, she said, her voice tense with concentration. "I've lost their primary communication signal, but I'm detecting what might be an emergency beacon or backup communication device. The signal is weak and intermittent, but it's moving away from their last known position." The final phase of the operation would test whether Sarah's analytical skills could overcome the enemy's operational security measures and complete the elimination of a significant regional threat. The success or failure of tracking the command element would determine whether the mission was a complete success or a partial victory that left dangerous operatives free to plan future attacks. The weak signal that Sarah had detected became the focus of the entire command center as the final phase of the operation unfolded. The command element represented not just the immediate threat of continued attacks, but also the intelligence and coordination capabilities that could regenerate the entire operational network if allowed to escape. Sarah worked with an intensity born of understanding that this might be the only opportunity to eliminate a threat that had already demonstrated sophisticated planning and operational capabilities. The intermittent signal she was tracking was barely detectable above background noise, but it represented the only electronic thread connecting them to the escaping command element. "The signal is definitely moving," Sarah announced to the command center. "Based on the signal strength variations and the timing of the intermittent transmissions, I believe it's a handheld device being used for emergency coordination. The transmission pattern suggests they're moving toward an extraction point." Colonel Harrison studied the tactical display as drone assets converged on the area where Sarah was tracking the weak signal. "Martinez, can you predict where this extraction point might be located?" Sarah's analysis drew on every aspect of the intelligence she had gathered throughout the operation. "Sir, based on the terrain, the signal direction, and the timing of their movement, I believe they're heading toward a location that would allow helicopter extraction or vehicle pickup. There's a clearing approximately 3 kilometers from their last known position that would serve that purpose." Master Sergeant Kelly repositioned Drone 1 to investigate the predicted extraction point while maintaining surveillance on the signal track. "Command, Drone 1 is approaching the suspected extraction point. Initial reconnaissance shows evidence of recent vehicle activity, but no current activity." The race against time intensified as Sarah continued tracking the weak signal, while the drone operators searched for visual confirmation of the command element's location. The signal was growing stronger, suggesting that the targets were indeed moving toward the area Sarah had identified. At 08:47 hours, thermal imaging from Drone 1 detected movement in the forest approaching the extraction point. "Command, this is Drone 1. Thermal signature shows 2 individuals moving through heavy forest cover, approximately 800 meters from the suspected extraction point." Sarah felt a surge of validation mixed with apprehension. Her analysis had been correct, but the final engagement would be the ultimate test of whether human intelligence and technological systems could work together to eliminate a sophisticated threat. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah reported, "I'm detecting increased signal activity. The pattern suggests they're communicating with an extraction team. Based on the signal characteristics, I believe extraction is imminent." The tactical situation required immediate action. If the command element reached the extraction point and successfully escaped, they would retain the knowledge and capabilities to reconstitute their operational network and plan future attacks against civilian and military targets. "All units, prepare for immediate engagement," Harrison ordered. "We cannot allow these operatives to escape with their operational knowledge intact." But as Drone 1 moved into position for engagement, Sarah detected a new complication in the electronic signals. "Colonel Harrison, I'm picking up additional communication signals. There appears to be an extraction team already in position at the location." The intelligence changed the tactical picture significantly. Instead of engaging 2 individuals attempting to reach an extraction point, the operation now involved an unknown number of additional personnel who were already in position to provide support and covering fire for the escaping command element. Master Sergeant Kelly confirmed Sarah's analysis through visual reconnaissance. "Command, Drone 1 has visual confirmation of vehicles and additional personnel at the extraction point. Count appears to be at least 4 additional individuals, with what looks like military-grade equipment." Colonel Harrison faced a final command decision that would determine the success or failure of the entire operation. Engaging a larger, well-equipped force at a prepared position involved significantly more risk, but allowing the command element to escape would leave a dangerous threat operational in the region. Martinez, Harrison said, based on your communication analysis, what's your assessment of their operational timeline? How long do we have before extraction is complete? Sarah analyzed the signal patterns with the focus of someone who understood that lives might depend on her assessment. Sir, based on the communication timing and the movement patterns, I estimate we have less than 5 minutes before the command element reaches the extraction point and potentially escapes. Harrison coordinated with regional, air support and ground units while directing the drone operators to prepare for a complex engagement against a reinforced position. The operation had evolved from a routine drone mission to a comprehensive counter-terrorism operation, guided by the analytical insights of a relay operator. At 0853 hours, the final engagement began as Drone 1 engaged the extraction team's position, while additional air support targeted escape routes. Sarah continued monitoring communications throughout the engagement, providing real-time intelligence about enemy coordination and potential reinforcements. The battle was brief but intense, with the precision of drone strikes overwhelming the extraction team's defensive capabilities. When the engagement concluded, thermal imaging confirmed that the threat had been eliminated and that no personnel had escaped the area. Command, this is Drone 1. All targets eliminated. No evidence of successful extraction or escape. The command center erupted in controlled celebration as the realization sank in that the operation had been a complete success. A sophisticated terrorist network that had posed a significant threat to civilian and military operations had been eliminated through a combination of advanced technology and exceptional human analytical capabilities. Colonel Harrison turned to Sarah, who was still monitoring communication frequencies to ensure that no additional threats had been missed. Martinez, I want you to know that your analysis and dedication prevented what could have been a major tragedy and eliminated a significant, ongoing threat to regional security. Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and accomplishment as she realized what had been achieved. In less than 12 hours, she had gone from being dismissed as just a relay operator to playing a crucial role in a major counter-terrorism operation. Her years of careful observation and analytical skill development had proven that human intelligence remained irreplaceable even in an age of sophisticated artificial intelligence systems. Sir, Sarah replied, I'm honored to have contributed to the mission's success. But I think today proved that our most advanced systems work best when they're supported by human analytical capabilities that can recognize patterns and deceptions that machines might miss. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison nodded in agreement. Martinez, you've demonstrated that the future of military intelligence isn't about choosing between human analysts and artificial intelligence systems. It's about combining both capabilities to achieve results that neither could accomplish alone. As the command center began the process of mission debriefing and after-action reporting, Sarah returned to her communication monitoring duties with a new understanding of her role and capabilities. She was no longer just a relay operator who passed messages and maintained equipment. She had proven herself to be an intelligence analyst whose unique skills complemented and enhanced the most advanced technological systems in the military inventory. The successful operation would lead to changes in how communication analysts were utilized and valued within the military structure. But for Sarah, the most important outcome was the knowledge that her years of dedication to understanding the subtle patterns of human communication had prevented a tragedy and saved lives. She had shown that sometimes the most sophisticated technology needed the insight that could only come from human experience and intuition.